Hello everybody, my name's Ryan and I'm a driving instructor, and today, driving test cancellations. So driving test cancellations, what's all that about? Well, before we go any further, like, comment and subscribe. Well, this sort of February and kind of into March, I normally just do Blythe and Gosforth test centres. I sometimes do Alnwick, depending on where the customer's located, but I mostly cover South Northumberland, and that's like Cramlington, Blythe, Bedlington, Ashington, Morpeth, and it just depends on where the customer lives. So they could be living in like kind of Cramlington and do the test either in Blythe or Gosforth. They could be living in Morpeth and find that it's easier to get to Gosforth than it is to get to Blythe, which it sometimes is. It might be that they can actually find it's easier to get to Alnwick, especially if you're over towards sort of Stoniton and things like that. It depends on the local area. So I've got a choice of kind of 3 driving test centres around me. Although you probably wouldn't go to Gosforth if you lived in Blythe, and you probably wouldn't go to Alnwick if you lived in Blythe, because that's kind of pointless. So you kind of choose the one that's going to be local, and you can also judge on the people's driving style and see what they're like. If they're a little bit more sort of street savvy, if they like the big chunky roads and the big chunky roundabouts, then kind of Blythe or Gosforth suitable. If they prefer the country roads, then sort of Blythe or Alnwick. Or if they're in Morpeth, then Morpeth's very similar in a way to doing tests in Alnwick. So it depends on the person, and it depends on where they live. Now lately I've had a lot of driving test cancellations, things where we booked out, because I use the booking service. If you don't know, if you're not an instructor, you won't know this, but we have a different system that's regulated by the DVSA, the government service, the civil service, that they say we can't misuse the system. There's loads of terms and conditions where you can't pre-book for a pupil, things like that. Because of all these terms and conditions, then what you tend to do is you tend to agree with your pupil that you book them a driving test. And you book them a driving test for a future date. Now, normally, if they're kind of test ready, then you'll book them something, I don't know, like a month and a half in advance. Now, because, of course, the waiting list is horrendous, and I'm still watching this whole we'll be ready in 7 weeks thing, then by December 2025, I know we're only 2 months in, then I've been watching, and we're getting sort of June. So because we're getting June, I'm getting 5 months of waiting, 4.5 months of waiting. So quite a lot of the time, if that pupil's been sort of ready, then I'll put them a test in, and it's got to be put in for June. I might find somebody who isn't quite right for a driving test. Maybe they've done about 40 hours, don't feel right, they're not feeling right, they're not sure about a really specific junction or a really specific roundabout, so they struggle. So what you do is you swap them round, because you can in the booking service that the instructors use, that you just swap them. You can swap them in the system. It's perfectly fine to do that as long as both parties agree. Swap it around. What I have noticed lately, though, is because the DVSA have been taking more instructors on, there's a fair chance that the instructor that they're about to take on either wasn't ready for the job, didn't pass the assessment, maybe didn't fancy it, and they've been cancelling driving tests all over the place. Now, you can't predict where Joe Bloggs wants a holiday, who works as an examiner at Gosforth or Blythe. If he wants a kind of a holiday in June, then you can't predict. You can't predict when people are going to be sick. Well, what I've got a feeling is they were going to add a new approved examiner through assessment, but they were going to add a new examiner to Blythe test routes, and they were going to add this examiner. And what's actually happened is that this examiner probably hasn't passed his qualification, may have not decided it was for him, and we've ended up with loads of cancellations in Blythe. Up to now, I think I've had about 14 of them out of the 30 odd that are on my system booked. So yeah, I'm about there. I have about, if you're interested, I have about 40 pupils. Normally I have about 2 or 3 on the way into theory. Once they get theory, I then kind of look, right, how far are you in? Done 20 hours, right, you need another 20, 30 hours. Right, if you've got all that time, you're doing private practice, yeah, that's great. Well, let's book you a test. And it'll always be way past whatever you've booked. Yesterday I had one for a lad who lives in Ashton. He failed his test. You've probably seen that one where he just kind of doesn't park properly. It was a little bit unlucky, one of them things. Kind of quite a nice drive. Clipped that little daft curb on the left. I think Aaron commented on it actually, and Aaron's passed now. So, but somebody commented on it and said, "Oh yeah, I've caught my wheel there as well." Blah blah blah. And so what we did was, because he was test ready, and I took him out another 10 hours. We swapped one, and we swapped it, and it was all right because the other person who we swapped with was like, "Yeah, I'm absolute miles away. When we're filling in progress, I'm only getting sort of 4s or 5s maybe out of 10." And because I'm only getting like halfway, maybe I need to work on some stuff. So yeah, I'm not ready. So we just swapped them. But when we went to swap it, get an email yesterday, it's already been swapped. The lads already arranged the day off from work, and the DVSA have swapped it. But they've swapped it for like 4.5 weeks later. So that's an additional expense to the pupil, not just in lesson time, but also in time off, and it's also mentally, it can be expensive. A lot of people forget that sometimes it's not about money, it's about the mental side of this job, and that it can really put people back. I think I put that I had 3 driving tests this week, and now I've only ended up with 2. It's just what happens sometimes, and it's just a little bit disappointing. But yeah, I think we have a lot at the moment. I had a couple in Gosforth last year where I think maybe the examiner was sick or something like that. But you can't help being human. You can't help having holidays. I think they do this rotational holiday thing the same way we used to do when we were driving buses, that you had fixed holidays, and if you wanted a holiday in September, you just went down the office and said, "Can I swap with Joe Bloggs so that he has my August and I have his September?" Something like that. So I think that's probably what they do. They probably, like, you can have these holidays, and they probably do a lot of overtime. And it's not the examiners. You can't blame the examiners for this. This is a lack of resource by the DVSA for all these cancellations. Maybe the DVSA should be a bit more cuter, a bit better about their resource planning. Because in a professional company, I don't think you would get this. If I thought that you could sell the DVSA, literally sell the DVSA to a private company, I don't think you would get the same level. I think they would have to reduce the backlog, otherwise they'd get fined, where the government can't. The government can't fine themselves. So I think if it was a private company, I think it'd be a little bit better. I also think our system, if it wasn't run by PADI, DVSA, then I think our system would be better. A lot of people think, well, I know it's the government, you've got to run it through the government. You could run licensing through the government, because that's important. That's a lot of people's data, so you probably wouldn't share that data. But with driving tests, a little bit different. I think you could flag that out easily. You could still keep it under government scrutiny, but with selling everything off, like the water, the gas, the electricity and everything else, it's one of those things that you just think, why have they kept hold of it? What's the reason? Anyway, I've ranted a bit. I was just explaining that I've had a lot of cancellations. Maybe you've had a cancellation. Maybe you type about it. If you like what you saw, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.